Well, for more on BNN Bloomberg's top line, the TSX is trading again today after a technical glitch closed markets mid-afternoon on Friday. Let's figure out what exactly went wrong and what we should be doing about it. Let's bring in now from the TSX Broadcast Center in downtown Toronto, Diana Avigdor, head of trading at Barometer Capital Management. From the trading floor of the NYSE in New York, we've got Peter Costa standing by. He's the president of Empire Executions. And here in studio, Steve Hawkins, co-chief executive officer and Chief Investment Officer at Horizons ETF Management. Welcome to you all, and thank you very much for being here. There's a lot to discuss. I think that there were a lot of viewers who were really quite concerned, maybe a little bit of panicky in the marketplace on Friday when the market shut down and did not reopen. So thank you all for being here from your perspectives, your traders, your investors. Steve, let me start with you in terms of how this happened and should it not happen in Canada? Because I don't think it happens in New York right now, and I'm going to get Peter's take on that in just a second.
Well, it does put a black eye on the Canadian capital markets industry as a whole, and that's why we're very, very concerned about this ever potentially happening again. And the last time we had an outage with the TMX was probably 2008. The big misconception here is, though, that the capital markets shut down, which is not the case. The TMX is only 40 to 50% of the everyday trading volume out there. There are several other venues for trades to be executed, and all of the retail marketplace really shouldn't have seen any sort of hiccup from their own trade execution of equities or ETFs. It doesn't really matter. They're all sort of executed through a smart hub where it gets redirected to the different exchanges which occur in Canada.
So let's talk about that further then. And Diana, let me bring you into this conversation. With respect to it shouldn't have happened, Steve, that the retail viewer, our viewer out there, the investment advisors should have been able to direct their trades or know what trades they still had in the market. That didn't happen, did it? And Diana, let me get your take in terms of how this would have impacted our viewers.
So we were lucky it was a low volume Friday. There were no rebalances. It was not month end. It was not quarter end. It was very, very, very light volume. So we're thankful it happened that day because there really wasn't any spillover volume. We watched the open very closely today to see whether there was any spillover trades, to your point, Catherine, whether there was any outstanding orders that could not be done. Now, anecdotally, talking to certain dealers, they were saying that at the gut feel level, there were a lot of trades that were done upstairs. What that means is just buying and selling by finding the two sides of the trade and then just crossing those trades as opposed to electronically routing to the TMX. But in this case, there's 11 other markets in Toronto, in Canada, to route to. So it wasn't felt. And the folks at BMO, for example, they calculated that the closing prices on other exchanges only would have been 0.10 beeps different than the 137 halt on the TMX. So there wasn't a big impact this time. I just wonder, and you worry and you scratch your head, what would have happened on a big rebalance day, for example. So certainly a small reputational impact, nothing financial at this time.
Right. And let's be clear. I mean, nothing financial for perhaps all of you who are the bigger players in the market. But what about the individual who, doesn't have what you just described, Diana, for our viewers to understand? When you say, find the buyer, find the seller, I mean, that's what was always human about trading versus technology, is that if you're a big institutional player, you can do that. That's how the business was done. Now it's so electronic. This is a perfect example of why you actually still do need humans right. to be able to execute those trades.
But Catherine,
yeah.
just let me jump in just for a second. Actually, if somebody large would have had to execute a trade, they would have had a bigger problem executing than the smaller retail account. Somebody who has 100 shares or 1,000 shares to trade can more easily maneuver a smaller volume environment that, say, a big institutional trader
Sure.
needs to trade a block. So to the extent that the volume did not sustain a large trader, it actually benefited the smaller retail account for being able to go anywhere.
Right, but that brings up the question as to go anywhere. Steve mentioned, we need a hub of some sort, some type of consolidated platform. And Peter, I want to bring you in now, because tell me what it's like on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. A lot of people have been citing that when the NYSE was had an outage in 2015 for about 3 hours, nobody felt it. Nobody necessarily knew. Do you agree with that statement? Because we're hearing that from the CEO of the NEO Exchange. And if that's the case, how should we be mimicking what you've done on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange so that this doesn't negatively impact our investors?
Well, with the NYSE, what they've done is they have redundancies. Obviously, Toronto has the same thing. But with the redundancies, they also, because of the mandate from the SEC, that if anything happens in our market, the orders are automatically routed to ARCA, NYSE ARCA. If it doesn't go to ARCA, it will go to the NASDAQ or any of the other competing exchanges. So orders will get executed. We do 25% of the volume of our listed volume here, and there are deep, not necessarily deep markets, but there are active markets elsewhere. So if an order gets locked up here at the New York Stock Exchange, it automatically routes to another venue, so people get their executions. So, I mean, there is something in place. Hopefully this never happens here. You have hardware backups. We have, 2 different data centers that we route orders through. So there's a lot of money being spent and a lot of testing being done at the NYSE to make sure that this doesn't happen. But, if you really go back in time, in 1996 or 97, I don't remember which year it was, a squirrel supposedly ate in a line, one of the transmission lines in Connecticut, and put the NASDAQ out for an hour and a half. So, I mean, stuff does happen.
Yeah.
So you have to be, to be prepared for it.
Peter, I remember that, but I don't know that if people could hear it. You said a squirrel. A squirrel.
Yeah, a squirrel. Apparently, that's what they came back with. I mean, the NASDAQ is a competing marketplace, so maybe that was something that might have been set up by the NYSE. I'm not sure, but I do think there was some.
Yeah, it was 1999. It's possible. I mean, it just is.
No, it's. You never know. I mean, there are things that can happen. Lightning strikes. You name it. There's acts of God can put out a system, and you have to have some sort of redundancy, something in place to route orders to make sure that customers are filled, and that concern about the primary marketplace, although it's important, you have to, for that short period of time, you have to be able to make sure the clients are being satisfied.
Yeah, so just real brief here, Peter, when you saw this happen here in Canada, and the fact that the TSX trades, 50% of the volume versus what you say NYSE, 25% of the volume. This is our main market, the TSX. What would you want to see happen here in Canada from the regulators to make sure this doesn't happen again? Or more importantly, that our viewers are safe?
Well, what the thing is that I'm not 100% sure about exactly what happened, because you have a hardware problem, which, from what I understand, that's like the last thing you ever want to tell your clients or anybody, that you have a hardware problem, because if you have 1 server or 10 servers, you should have 20. If you have 20 servers, you should have 40. So, the thing that the regulators will probably look at is, what about the redundancies that the TSX has?
Okay.
Do they have enough? Are they functioning?
Steve, let me get from you. You run a very, very large ETF business. What do you want to see done, if anything, here in Canada?
Well, to your point, this type of thing should not happen. There should not be a hardware failure which is taking down our primary stock exchange and its 2 peripheral exchanges here in Canada. That said, from a regulator perspective, I'm not really sure that there is anything that they can do. But the TSX, as our primary capital markets go-to, they are the picture of the Canadian capital markets for the world to see Canada. This cannot happen. There cannot be a hardware issue that happens.
How do you, but hardware aside, because it can happen, it can happen. Do we need another more prominent exchange? That's what their competitors would say we do as the solution.
They have said that already.
They have said
it. The TMX, again, is only 40-50% of the daily trading volume right now. We have several other exchanges in Canada. The retail order, as Diana said, as Peter was saying, it was executed somewhere else. It was very easy to transition. Mm-hmm. But if this was a big institutional trading day, as Diana was going on, if it was triple witching or quadruple witching, mm-hmm. That would have been a very, very bad thing for Canada. The market was very quiet, and it didn't move a lot. So there wasn't a lot of trading volume, but trading volume still dropped 50% because the TMX wasn't out there. Mm-hmm. institutional people were looking at Canada saying, I don't have anywhere to execute. I don't know what to do. Retail investors are, the TMX is down. That means I shouldn't be putting my orders in because I don't know what to do. There's a lot of misinformation out there that because there are so many different exchanges, but people don't know that they really exist. People don't know that there's more than the TMX. The regulators do need to say something. You know, they do need to step in to make sure that this type of thing doesn't happen. Last year it was a software problem. This time it's a hardware problem. What is it going to be next?
But isn't one of the easy fixes, and Dana, let me ask you to weigh in on this, well, it's not, nothing's an easy fix, but to at least have pricing shown on other exchanges. Where is that?
So it's my understanding that that the pricing continued to be delivered in a fluid fashion. It certainly was on my screens and from other exchanges. What maybe Steve was referring to, a smart hub, a smart order routers, are those components of algorithmic systems that bring all these exchanges together. So just to back up, we have all this fragmentation, but we had to bring it back together. So continuous quotation continued unless you only signed up to the TMX. But the regulators do require people to sign up for data feeds from other exchanges because there is a best execution policy out there which requires you as a dealer to trade for your client at the best bid or offer. That may not be the TMX. So all quotes have to be incorporated. So I believe that that was a fluid situation. Quotes did not suddenly disappear off people's screens. But the one thing here that I'm scratching my head is things can happen, absolutely. Where are the backup systems? What were the backup systems? Why did the backup systems fail for something that is a crucial utility or stock exchange? So, you know, things do happen, squirrels do eat lines. Where's the backup system?
Okay, still some unanswered questions. I think we have to leave it there, unfortunately. We could keep going because, you know, at the end of the day, for me, I really want to know how the individual investor who, you know, wants to trade their own account on a discount brokerage, as an example, fared in all of this. So we'll follow up with that, I hope, as well. Steve, thank you so much for coming in. Thank you. Peter, thanks for joining us from the New York Stock Exchange as well, and as always. And Diana, good to be with you as well today. Thanks so much for everybody's input. It's something we're going to continue to watch for sure. Thank you.